Greetings from a very warm Eugene. It's about 100 degrees outside right now, but the smoke from nearby fires is keeping the temperature down a little bit. But I'd like to share some images, pictures, some graphics, and some stories from my trip to Europe this past summer. That was from May into July. So let's just get to it. Here is the slideshow. Jan's trip to Europe, May through July 2023. This is a map of where I went. Just a quick overview. Started out in Stockholm and made some visits in Stockholm and nearby. Stayed several days in Denmark, in Copenhagen. Took a train down here to South Central Germany and did some bike riding. The green line indicates bike riding. I had a bike with me. A distinction to make: this was a trip with a bicycle. It wasn't a bicycle trip. It was a trip with a bicycle. Gotta have a bicycle with me. Put it on the train, on buses, on ferries. Use the bicycle a lot. And from southern Germany, a couple days in Switzerland, and uh, down to Lago di Como, northern Italy. Nice place. I was there last summer and I wanted to go back for more. And I stayed with some friends near Lago di Como. That was great. And then down to Tuscana. I did some bike riding in Tuscana in the area of the hill towns. And when I finished with that, I took a ferry to Sardinia, did a little bit more bike riding down here, just kind of a little bit off the map here, up to Alghero. And Alghero was kind of the destination. I spent 3 weeks in Alghero. We'll see a little bit more of that. And when I left Alghero, a little bit of time here near Olbia on the east side of Sardinia. And then I spent a little time here near Rome, uh, Ostia Antica, the ancient port city of Rome. Wow, that was amazing. And at this point, I had only a couple of weeks left on my trip, and I had to make time, more travel than sightseeing, going up through northeastern Italy, Trieste, Ljubljana, Zagreb. Uh, I spent a little bit of time in Hungary. This was all train here through a bit of Slovakia into Poland, uh, up into northern Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. And from this point here, Ventspils, Latvia, which was really nice. Wow, what a nice place. I took a ferry uh, back to Stockholm, and then that's where I took the plane back to Eugene. The whole trip, about 3 months. Great time. So I'm very geographical. So what I did is I had two maps. This is the northwest coast of the United States, British Columbia, up to the panhandle of Alaska. And this map here is Central Europe. You have Rome right here, and you have Stockholm up here. Rome and Medford, Oregon are about the same latitude, just a little bit less than 45 degrees north. And then Stockholm and Juneau are approximately very similar latitudes. So that means the distance between Medford and Juneau is about the same is the distance from Rome to Stockholm. So pretty good amount of travel and just an interesting comparison. I like comparing, seeing geographical kind of content. So another little bit of geography. We're all used to the Mercator projection, map projection, where the further north or south you go, the more distorted the map becomes. But it's one of the most common maps. Makes Greenland and Alaska and Siberia look like they're just giant. That's just the way map projections work. So when you're thinking about flying from, say, Seattle to London, it's not so much an east-west flight. You're not going in a straight line over the northeastern US. What you're actually doing is you're going up over the top of the planet. You're going over Greenland because the Earth is not flat, it's a sphere. And that's the shortest way to go from Seattle to London is a line like this. Actually, it is a straight line. It just looks like a curve because of the map projection. That's just interesting. It's not going east and west. You go up over the top of the planet. And here's proof right here on my flight to London and then to Stockholm. This is southern Greenland. This is not the coast of Massachusetts. So anyway, I did fly to Stockholm. A few pictures of Stockholm. This is kind of the old town in Stockholm. Some just wonderful architecture. I really like older architecture, medieval, ancient architecture. I'm really into that. And many European cities have old towns, Starigrad or Centro Storico, old towns. I stayed with friends in Stockholm. One of my best friends, her brother married a Swedish woman, and he ended up moving to Sweden. That was like 40 years ago. I stayed with Jeff and Helena, and they have a son who lives in Stockholm, Adrian, and his wife Annika. I stayed with them in Stockholm for several days, and then I visited Jeff and Helena. They live about an hour north of Stockholm. That was all really fun. Here's a picture of Jeff and Helena. This part of Sweden is pretty flat, lots of water, and very cool. It was still middle of May and unusually chilly. So, but we did some sightseeing, had a really nice time visiting with Jeff and Helena. Heard their story about how they met. That was a great story. I love travel stories. I love to hear about people's lives. And also, while visiting, I made sound with a saxophone for the first time. That was really great. I really like the saxophone, and Jeff plays saxophone. So I stayed in Sweden for about a week, and then it was time to head to Copenhagen. I belong to an organization named Servas, wonderful peace organization intended to connect people. And Jesper here in Copenhagen, also a member of Servas. I stayed with him in his apartment in Copenhagen for about 3 days. You could see the backyard of the British embassy from his place. You saw the garden parties when at the new coronation of their new king. They had a big garden party, and Jesper could look out his window and he could see it. But we did a lot of biking around in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is just a fascinating city. The architecture, the history. Of course, it is well known for being a place where a lot of people ride bicycles. And sure enough, there are lots of bicycles. in Copenhagen, bike paths, bikeways, bike freeways. The city is really trying to encourage people to ride bikes. There's more bikes than there are cars. But also important to know that Copenhagen was a bike-friendly place even before World War II. So all these bicycles isn't really something completely new. After World War II, with the Americans coming to Europe and wanting to help reconstruct because there's a lot of damage, the Americans wanted to encourage the reconstruction of Europe to be like American cities. And this partly happened, but fortunately it didn't completely happen. Even these famous bicycle towns like Copenhagen and Amsterdam hosted American highway engineers who came over to tell them that, well, you know, you really need to have freeways all over the place. Fortunately, the public rose up against a lot of these ideas historically. That was in the 70s and the 80s. Didn't stop all of that, but stopped a considerable amount of it. A lot of people in Europe, even in the 70s and 80s, recognized we don't want to be like American cities. There certainly are plenty of cars and freeways in Europe, but not to the extent we have here in the US. And certainly the transportation options in Europe are infinitely better than the US. But this is just a great street scene. There's some bicycles everywhere. It was just wonderful to see so many bikes. And of course, Copenhagen has its own older vernacular architecture, a lot of water. Both Stockholm and Copenhagen have a lot of water. So that's a big part of their history. That's a big part of their urban shape and form because they've got bays and inlets all over the place. So one thing I did in Copenhagen is I bought a bicycle. This is the bicycle I would have with me for most of my trip. And here it is, all kitted out, panniers in my backpack. And this was how I spent a lot of my time in Europe, was with this bicycle. Again, I put it on the train a lot. I put it on buses. I put it on ferries, but I had it with me the whole time. And I did do some bike traveling where I was just going by bike and camping out at night. That was just so much fun. So from Copenhagen, I went through Hamburg and towards southern central Germany. Uh, Germany has different types of areas where some areas more protected from development. And I wanted to visit a couple of these areas, not like national parks, but people live there. There's farms, there's industry, but it's looks pretty nice. So on the train to Gunzenhausen, which is where I started my trip, the train went over a river, and there was just like this amazingly tall bridge that went over this river, and it was like you're in an airplane. And this is just a view. This is from the train. I'm not in an airplane doing this. This is the train just for a couple kilometers. You're way up above this town. It's just like to see what people's backyards look like. So this is the train station in Hamburg right here. Boy, it's a pretty busy train station. Lots of trains go in and out. They certainly would have other train stations in Hamburg too. All the larger cities in Europe have multiple train stations. We got on the train, or I say I got on the train, all of us on the platform, a lot of people on the platform ready to board the train to more southern Germany. And the train already had a lot of people on it. It's a crowded train. So I ended up sitting on the floor. This is the area for bicycles. Most trains in Italy have a bicycle place where you can stash your bike. And in some places, you even need a reservation for your bike. Uh, but the rest of the train, all the seats were taken. I sat on the floor in this area where people put their bikes, and I sat next to a guy, a German guy, and we ended up doing a lot of talk. Of course, he speaks good English, and we just had a couple hours just to become acquainted. Turns out that he was a teacher in a high school, and he taught health, fitness, and well-being to like high school students. That's what he taught about exercise, about diet, about having a healthy lifestyle. I asked him how far he could go on his scooter on a charge of electricity. He had a scooter with him. And I asked him, how far can you go on your scooter? And he said, that's not an electric scooter. He's 35 years old and his scooter is human powered. We had a good laugh. And even more interesting, that before he became a high school teacher, he spent 12 years in the German army. And he was, from what I could understand, kind of a mid-level tank commander. So he knew all about tanks. Um, I don't think he ever was in a battle situation, but he was in the tank corps. So he went from being a tank commander to a high school teacher who also happens to be vegetarian. Seems like quite a change in his career. Great stories. And actually, I talked with this young woman here. She was reading a book. She wasn't looking at her electronic device. She was actually reading a book. And I asked her about it. And of course, she speaks good English. She was reading this book about how to become a better person, how to manifest the good stuff that you have to offer the wider world. It's a great conversation. She's just like to learn how to be a better person. Sounds like a good idea for everybody. So I did arrive here in the dark at Gunzenhausen. It was cool, wasn't cold. Yeah, this is middle May, so it's not summertime, but it's not wintertime either. But this is where I would begin my bike ride, but I didn't know exactly where I needed to go once I left the train station in this very small town. So I just kind of wandered around in the dark for a while outside of town, and I found a place to put up my hammock. Of course, I travel with a hammock, and it was a little bit wet, not too much, but I have a tarp that I can put over my hammock, and even room for the bicycle, so I can be totally out of the rain. Um, this is the way I like to travel. I love to camp out. I did a lot of camping on this trip, so this is a good example just outside of Gunzenhausen. And the next morning, I asked some questions and found my way to start my bike ride. There's Radweg, that's the German word, basically the bike way. Fahrrad is bicycle in German, so Rad is kind of like wheel. It's the wheel way. They got a lot of that. Pretty good signage most of the time. Um, Germany's a pretty well organized place. I was impressed, and they have lots of places to ride bicycles where you're actually not on the street with cars. That's kind of why I went there. This area's little hills. It's not flat. It's not really what you would call hilly. Really nice bike riding. And this is just a view along the way. I don't know how old this is or what this fort is right here, but just to see this kind of feature, there's a story there. I just love to see old construction. I like old buildings, and this is, of course, modern down here. So as I'm biking around, I certainly not only like to see the landscape, I like to have encounters with people as well. So this picture here, southern Germany, a very interesting kind of church steeple. You know, there's lots of different architectural styles for church steeples. I saw this one on in the distance as I was coming into this small village, and I wanted to get a closer look. And as I came closer, I saw this woman here sitting in a bus shelter, is what it was, in front of this church. And of course, up here is a stork nest. This is way up there. That's way up there. And then across the little street, kind of an open plaza on the other side of this quiet street, was a maypole, with a tree, a cut tree at the very top. And then on the maypole, this is kind of a community focus kind of a place. They have a May Day event in a lot of German towns, as I found out. And up on the pole, there's different plaques that show pictures and represent the various kinds of interests in the town, like agriculture or hunting or beer drinking or electricity or soccer, football, all these different plaques. I just found this really exciting. And this woman sitting here, I want to express my just enjoyment of seeing all this stuff. And I don't know very little German, but I started saying German to her, and I know enough to say something, but not a lot more than that. But when I was searching for a word, I slipped out a couple words of Italian, and she looked up and said, "Le parla italiano? Do you speak Italian?" And I said, "Si, un po," a little bit. So we ended up having a conversation in Italian because she was from Rome. Totally unexpected. That was so funny. I just really like encounters like this where just something totally unexpected happens that's fun and creative. I like that. So this other picture here, I was going through another small town, pretty densely populated. Not every place had a garden, but this place did. I saw it coming up the street, and I saw there's a little driveway, and they had a garage where the car pulled in. There was their house, and I saw some plants in containers, and I immediately recognized, ah, they've got a fig tree in a container, and they had a a type of hardy palm tree in a container. And I saw this stuff, and of course I know what they are. And I just coasted into their driveway, and they're just kind of see me coming and just kind of standing there, kind of wondering who's this. And I said, Guten Tag, good day. And I know enough German, and we managed to communicate that we both really enjoyed plants. I was familiar with a lot of these plants because I have figs here in Eugene. Told them, of course, I was from Oregon, and they told me, and gesturing, because they speak about as much English as I do German. But we had a very meaningful interaction about gardening and about plants. And I took this picture when I left. You can see this really nice espalier. That's probably an apple tree or something back behind them. And this is their spring garden. All this lettuce, really nice and tidy. They were just really nice. Again, just a wonderful, unscripted, spontaneous encounter. So I continue biking that day, and I kind of was wondering which direction I needed to go. The signage pretty good, but not perfect, and neither are my navigation skills. I ran into these guys. These are just some German guys who are just out bike riding. You know, a lot of people bike ride. Uh, as in the US, a lot of people just like to go out with their pals and ride bicycles. So I ran into these guys and asked them some directions, and I rode with them for a little while. And they said, "Okay, we're going this way, but you go that way." And they got me pointed in the right direction. So they were really fun. They all spoke some English, and it was a nice encounter. And this is actually one of the Rodweg, one of the bikeways right here. and I just happened to encounter a procession of there was some kind of church holiday or special date or something like that, and they're out and they're blessing a shrine on this tree right here. So I was just waiting for them to finish because underneath the tree there was also a bench, and I wanted to sit on that bench and have some breakfast. But I waited um, until they finished their blessing. So just another totally unplanned little event right there. That was great. So I had an awesome bike ride for about 5 days in southern Germany. And then I put the bike on a train and I went to Chur, Switzerland, which is kind of in the mountains in Switzerland, not up in the mountains. Its elevation probably isn't even 500 meters above sea level, but it has mountains all around it. Of course, it's very scenic. Um, and Chur is a popular town. And I just saw this family on bicycles right here, this part recumbent, part stand-up bicycle right here. This tandem bicycle, and then here's the kids with their bicycles. They just look great. So I took their picture and I talked with them just a little bit. So from Chur, I put my bike on a train, and my destination was Tirano, Italy. And in order to go to Toronto, the train zigzags up the mountains. It goes through some tunnels. It's very spectacular. This is the same track as the Bernina Express, which you can spend a lot of money on. It's a scenic uh, kind of a train that has a lot of publicity. Well, I didn't go on that train, but I went on the tracks that train. So basically saw the same stuff. It is really pretty. Look at that. It's just beautiful. And I also knew that the train stops at Bernina Pass, which is the high point in Switzerland. And from Bernina Pass, you go down slope, and in about 30 kilometers, you arrive at the border between Switzerland and Italy. And I got off the train up there at over 2,000 meters above sea level, about 6,500 feet above sea level, and I coasted down. I coasted down almost 6,000 feet. It took me a couple hours. Started off in the snow and ice up here at the pass. That's what it looked like up at the pass. It was probably about freezing. It wasn't any colder than freezing. It was pretty chilly. But I went through a lot of seasonal change from ice and snow down to uh, moving towards summertime by the time the train I arrived to Toronto. Just a just a wonderful coast, just downhill a long ways. It was just a real hoot doing that. And along the way, this is actually the train right here. It shares the road just a little bit. If I had stayed on the train, I would have been here on this road. This is still Switzerland, and it's an Italian speaking part of Switzerland as well. Lugano is another good sized town in Switzerland that's in southern Switzerland and kind of sticks into northern Italy. That's another Italian speaking part of Switzerland. Other parts of Switzerland are French and German and all kinds of smaller languages and dialects. There's a lot of different languages there in Switzerland. So this is our map. What we just looked at was in this area right here. This is Switzerland and this is northern Italy right here. And I am making my way to Lago di Como. This is actually Toronto right here. Chur would be somewhere around in here. And this, you can maybe see this little green bit, that is my Discesa. my downhill coast, so Lago di Como, before going down this way. But first, let's just see a little bit of Dervio. Dervio is a town on Lago di Como that I identified, had a really nice campground, and uh, uh, Dervio kind of sticks out into Lago di Como. Actually, it's a little bit of an alluvial deposit from a creek, small river that runs into the lake. It's built out a little bit of an alluvial fan, so it's kind of flat, even though the general overall landscape is very steep all around the lake. But I arrived there in the late afternoon and found the campground, got myself situated, and my priority was to find a place to get a pizza and a beer. So this was just a local place. I went into crowded. They're watching soccer, football on TV. When I walked in the door, I looked to my left, and you could see there was a big opening into the pizza preparation place. There's just a couple kids in there, teenagers, and I challenged them. Got a phone call. I'm going to ignore it. I challenged them. Could you guys make a really good? I don't know what that is. Okay, I'll focus. Sounds like a nuclear attack on my answering machine. Oh, maybe I can finish this. So I challenged them to make a vegetarian pizza. And I went to sit down. They kind of acknowledged me. And I went to sit down and got a beer. And before I even really had the menu to make an order, this pizza was delivered right here. This is one of the best pizzas I've ever had. I really like a big, thick, chewy crust. And these are all grilled vegetables. And of course, there's some cheese and tomato sauce. This was just one of the best pizzas I've ever had. Those two high school teenagers did a good service to me with that pizza. So this is actually Dervio right here. This is Lago di Como, and you can see it is surrounded by mountains. This is a glacial lake. There's a number of lakes in northern Italy that were made during previous ice ages, and Dervio is a popular place. You can see towns over here. There's, I don't know what these people do living up on the mountainside here. Actually, Lugano, Switzerland is over this pass right here. I've been on the lake last year in another location, and I just, Lago di Como is just so beautiful. I just wanted to spend more time. Um, Corino Planio is a little village near Dervio, and this just has to be one of the most remarkable examples uh, of vernacular architecture. I love Italian sort of 600 year old vernacular architecture. Things aren't exactly straight up and down. This is kind of, this one book was written, architects architecture without architects. This is just what people built, and it's like here 500 years later, the balconies, the steps, the archways. I just love this. So Corino Planio near Dervio is just a great example of this kind of just this old. It looked pretty much like this probably hundreds of years ago. But of course, in more modern times, lots of potted plants. Just a lot of care went into this place. People do go here because it is so nice, and the local people really, uh, really keep it looking great. I saw this placemat in front of a door here in Corino Planio, and it basically says "Welcome," uh, and it's these three names. Let's see, there's OC, Pistachio, and Spritz. Obviously, there a cat, a dog, and a cat. This is, I think, probably a personalized doormat right here. So these little pets are saying welcome. And down here, you can't really read it, but it says something to the effect, oh, and by the way, Giorgio and Angela live here with us. It's really funny saying, like, the pets are saying this is our house. Oh, and we also have a couple of humans here too. I just found that sense of humor just to be so funny. Just really, I had a good laugh right there on the spot. I did some hiking up above Dervio also. There are people in earlier times, more people living up in the mountains, just sort of a rough existence. It's not really, you can't really do a lot of farming. I'm not sure exactly what people were doing living up there, but historically, there used to be more people up there on the hillsides. Um, but along the path, I saw this little feature right here. It says La Tana delle Streghe. And I didn't know what Tana meant. I knew Streghe, that's witches. But of course, I looked up Tana. And Tana means something kind of like a lair, sort of like a small cave, a little small enclosure, a lair. I think would be a real good translation for this. So this is the lair of the witches, and there are these little sort of doll type witches and a little make-believe fire in here. This is just some local sense of humor. I really enjoyed that. And then this also in Dervio, I went to a bakery, Panificio, because they really know how to make nice things with bread in Italy. And this woman works there, and this is her friend. And I talked with them some and just asked if I could take their picture. And so that was just kind of a nice little start for the day. That particular day, I was taking a bike ride from Dervio. I would go down the lake a ways. I would take a ferry to another town, and then I would ride along one of the legs of Lago di Como to a town named Como, and then I would come back on the other side of the lake to another town, and then take another ferry back to the side of the lake where Dervio is located, and then I would ride a couple more miles back to Dervio. That was like a full day bike ride. It was just an awesome bike ride. This is what that eastern leg of the of Lago di Como looks like. The lake is kind of shaped like an upside down Y. So this is the eastern leg of the lake, and you got to go around here. And Como is probably at this point it's another like 15 or 18 kilometers from here. But you're up above the lake a lot. The road's not very busy. You just see all these terraces and architecture and the mountains. Just, it was just an awesome, beautiful bike ride. And this is another picture. I was on this side of the lake, and now I'm going back up, uh, back towards Dervio on the other side of the lake. You can see structures just like right down to the water. There's all these villas and gardens along the lake. It's just beautiful. And I saw this right here. You can't really tell very well, but you can see all these little yellow spots. This is a kumquat tree. And as I was riding past, I said, God, that's a huge kumquat tree. It's a giant kumquat tree. And this gate wasn't closed. The gate was open and there was a kumquat tree right there. And of course, I like picking fruit, and I looked at that gate and I looked at the kumquat, and I said, I gotta I gotta see what these kumquats are like. So I'm wondering, okay, I know it's probably an electric gate. So I kind of stood there for a couple minutes, and then I quickly ran the short distance to the kumquat tree and started picking a couple of kumquats. And then the gate started to creak, and I grabbed a few more kumquats and hustled back to the street side of the gate as the gate was beginning to close. And then when I got back to the street, the gate opened again. So I said, oh, okay, I think I see how this works. So the gate kind of reopened, and I went back to the kumquat to grab some more kumquats. There were like thousands on this tree. And then the gate started to move again. So I hustled back out to the street, and I said, that's good enough. I had about 10 or 15 kumquats I had for the rest of my bike ride. It was pretty hilarious to play this kind of cat and mouse with this electric gate that almost certainly had some kind of electronic eye that could notice things moving. I sort of waved to where I thought there might be a camera, and I said, thanks, Greg Quats. So I left Dervio, I left Lago de Como, and I went to stay several days with my friends Lorena and Cesare. They live very nearby. I met them and stayed with them several days last year. They're also members of Servas, and we had such a nice time last year. I wanted to go back and visit with them again. Just really, really nice couple. And we did some hikes nearby. Cesare and Lorena know each other from adventure types of outdoor activities. In past years, they were into spelunking, serious spelunking. That's where they met in Mexico, because Lorena is from Mexico, and they met in the outdoors, sort of adventure sport. They've also used to do hang gliding in this area here. They on this hike they pointed out where they had hang glided before and where they had some wrecks, and we're kind of both glad they could still walk. But just a lot of fun. This is we had a panini after this hike at this little kind of a cafe right here, and there was this big cat that was real friendly. So this was just a lot of fun. And this right here, we had to do some errands one day and had occasion to go into an Italian big box. This is an Italian big box. It's about as big as any big box I know of in the US. This has just got like everything. I didn't even go way down to the other end. This is like everything. So this type of retail commercial development is not only in Italy, but it's kind of all over the world. So here we are at Lorena and Cesare's kitchen on Guria. We're really into watermelon. So this was a morning I was leaving, just a really, really nice visit. So I took a train. I wanted to kind of meander and go some places I hadn't been before. So this is Bologna. This is a very well-known, larger Italian city. Attracts a lot of tourists for sure. The kind of medieval architecture, the Centro Storico, the old town is just fantastic. You just look at this architecture and it's like hundreds and hundreds of years old. Um, I uh, had to wait for a train for a couple hours. So of course, with a bicycle, it's easy to find the old town and have some time to do some exploring. That's why I had a bicycle. So I had a bit over an hour just to kind of look around Bologna and then back to the train station because I would be, this is Bologna here, went over the Apennine, it's pretty hilly area right here, and then down this way. This is a pretty seismically active part of Europe right here. But my destination was Poggio Bonzi. I chose Poggibonsi, kind of like Gunzenhausen, just because it's an interesting name. But I'd been in Tuscana before. I've been to Siena, I've been to San Gimignano, I've been to Firenze. I've been in the area before and even done a little bit of bike riding too. Pisa and Livorno are just right here. But I did this 5 day bike ride south from Poggibonsi down past Lago di Bolsena, right down here. It's about 5 days. Not so far, it's up and down. And I wasn't trying to cover too much distance too fast. Did a lot of nice camping out. It was just a great uh, a great little bit of a bike ride. But kind of got off to a little bit of a challenging start because I bought the bike in Copenhagen. You don't need to use gears in Copenhagen because it's flat. But here in Poggibonsi, I arrived late in the afternoon, late, almost in the evening, and was on my way out of town and had to shift gears to go up a hill with a derailleur where the bike shifted into the spokes and ruined the derailleur. Uh, I was stopped in my tracks, and I was lucky that I was able to even move the derailleur out of the spokes enough so I could push the bicycle to a place I noticed before the incident, where I kind of went up a little bit of a gravel road and found a couple of trees and put up my hammock right here. It wasn't where I planned it to be, but was I was immobilized substantially. And then the next day, I was able to uh, make the bike so at least I had one gear. And going back to Poggibonsi was mostly downhill. So I stopped at a little grocery store I saw from the street when I saw somebody walking into the grocery store. Um, I stopped a guy who was walking into the grocery store and asked him where there might be a bike shop. And he went into this lengthy set of directions, and my Italian just simply isn't good enough to follow all of that. And when I sort of, could you say that again? Could you? He figured the best thing to do was he said, "Mi segue," basically follow me. And he went back to his car and had me follow him. Boy, it was good because it was a lot of lefts and rights and going over a bridge. He led me to the bike shop, and I said, "Wow, thanks a lot." You know, he just really was very nice. That's something that happened many times during the trip. I don't have a mobile phone, so I don't have GPS and all of that stuff. I had to ask help with directions a fair number of times, and I just found so many people to be really helpful with that. So the bike was fixed. It wasn't anything too difficult. The derailleur was wrecked. I got a new derailleur. The guy did a good job. So I was on my way. I biked to Siena, and of course, Siena is another famous city known for its medieval architecture. This is this big Campo, the center part of Siena. I saw these three guys walking across this big area here on their bikes, and I kind of trotted down to them. I wanted to find out a little bit more about them. There were three German guys. They're actually from Freiburg, where I've spent a little bit of time actually in Freiburg. And they were just friends from school, and they were just doing this bike ride. They were biking from Freiburg to Rome, and then they were going to take a train back to Freiburg. They're having a great time, you know, just camping out. This guy had all the pizza. They were about ready to go find a place and have pizza. I'm guessing they were probably 20, 22, just having an awesome time. So that was a good little story. So I continued with my bike ride. One afternoon, I stopped in a little cafe and had some pizza and beer. And of course, they had Wi-Fi. It was a good chance to kind of check my email. That evening, I couldn't find any trees to put up my hammock, so I found this uh, sort of a little road that went up a little slope into some agricultural fields. Obviously, wasn't used very much, so I just camped out there. I had my tarp and sleeping bag and all that. I just slept on the ground that night. This is the view at night. There were some lights up on these hills. In the morning it was kind of foggy, and it took a while for the fog to lift. Just a beautiful spot to camp out in Toscana. So this is Bagni San Filippo. I was told about this place. This is hot water, of course, and it's a place you can go, and there are all these kind of pools where you can just kind of sit in the hot water, and the hot water starts off up here and just kind of cascades down. Up here, it's actually too hot to be in. That's too hot, and it kind of cools off a little bit the further down you go. But even this pool right here, you had to get in very carefully. It was plenty hot, and there's rivulets of water coming down that if you position yourself underneath them, they kind of splatter on your back, and you get a little bit of a spa treatment there too. So I camped out near here, and that turned out to be a really nice visit. I had to do a fair amount of pushing my bike uphill. I had a lot of gear, and just part of the deal is I had to push my bike. There were some climbs that might have been 200-300 meters, and I don't ride the bike up a hill like that, not with a load of 50 or 60 pounds. So I was really ready for this hot water that particular day. So then a day or two later, I was biking. This is near Lago di Bolsena, big a crater lake. Wow, it's a huge lake. And it turned out it rained that afternoon and evening, and I had to find a place to set up camp in the rain. And I did. This is a big olive tree right here. Earlier in the day, I had been to a grocery store and I bought a lot of food. So this was something I certainly identified on my trip as a peak experience when something is just even particularly enjoyable. And to be uh, out of the rain, it wasn't cold. It was cool, but it wasn't cold. Uh, and have my bike right there. My bike's out of the rain. I sort of had a multi-layer table, kind of like that chess game on Star Trek, where you're playing this game on several levels. Well, that's kind of what I ate off of. The bread was up here on the seat. This cheese and different kinds of savory stuff. Oh man, I wish you could find that here. And then I had my frisbee. Didn't throw it very much, but it also was used as a plate. So I had this sort of multi-level dining table there, and because of the rain, I actually had running water as well at that particular spot. So I am coming into Viterbo, and here are some more Italian big boxes. And I'm definitely not an advocate of building highways, but what seemed to happen here was, given how absolutely horrendous the traffic was, they built these big boxes. There's a bunch of them here, and look at the huge parking lot. They built these big boxes, but they didn't increase the road capacity. So the traffic here was just absolutely horrible. I just identified Viterbo as just a place I didn't want to go back to. So not long after that, I got on a train and I went to Civitavecchia, which is on the coast, not too far from Rome. And this is where I took a ferry to Sardinia. So again, this is our big map right here. This is the bike riding in Toscana, and this is the ride on the ferry Civitavecchia. It's about 10 hours. It's not so far. Early in the morning. Let's see. Actually, this ferry left late at night and arrived very early in the morning. And this is where I went to. Here's Olbia. This is where the ferry, Olbia. This is my eventual destination, Alghero. But from Olbia, I took a bus to Cala Gonone, one of my favorite places. I've been here a couple times before. Just this beautiful coastline right here, and I have some friends in Cala Gonone as well. We'll come back to this map here. This is actually a detail more of Alghero right here. But this is what the coastline looks like in Cala Gonone. This is this area back here. There are no roads. It's just too rugged to build a road. And but from Cala Gonone, there are boats that take people to these. There are several beaches out here. Just like this is just like unbelievable turquoise, clear water. I've done a good deal of scuba diving here before, so I'm pretty acquainted with the coastline. I really like this bench. I'd come down to this little park and I'd kind of self cater, get a pizza, have some food from the market. I just loved to sit on this bench just late in the day. There's a swing set over here, playground. You can kind of see a little bit of it there. And other benches. There's families. There's people just out enjoying the evening. So this is a very sociable place, and just one of my favorite spots just to enjoy the scenery and just seeing other people around who are also very much enjoying the evening. These are my friends right here. They're also Servas members. Um, they made acquaintance like 20 years ago here, and we kept up with our friendship, seen them a couple times uh, since that first visit. So we're having a nice pizza right here and in Cala Gonone. Yeah, okay, here we go. So this is one of the beaches near Cala Gonone. You can actually drive or you can bike to this beach, but this is where the road ends right here. And this is just beautiful water. You go around this corner right here, and there's caves in the shoreline. Of course, a lot of people just hanging out on the beach. People do a lot of climbing here, a lot of rock climbing. And this is further down the shoreline, Calapullia, right there. So I left Cala Gonone, and my plan was to go to one town called Oristano. And from Oristano, which is right here, I would bike from Oristano to Alghero. And you can see the scale. This is 20 miles right here. So that's about 55 or 60 miles. It's not so far. A fair amount of up and down. I didn't do that all in one day. I arrived in Oristano later in the day, and I camped out a couple places on the way to Alghero. But along the way, this right here is a remnant of the Nuragic culture that is a Bronze Age culture that was all over Sardinia 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. And this is kind of what they built. They stacked rocks on top of each other, and some even little villages. Of course, archaeologists or study this, dig stuff up, and try to get an idea. Okay, learn more about that civilization from what the remains were. And these are just some art, picture, uh, from the Nuragic people. They predate the Romans and the Phoenicians, you know, by like 1,000 years. So, but you see these remains scattered here and there all over Sardinia. I saw other ones too. So one night I camped out once again without the hammock, but I was right close to the water. Just beautiful. This kind of rock, I'm not familiar with this kind of rock. I'm not even sure what it was. Certainly some kind of maybe a relative of limestone. I'm not really sure, but I hiked around here and just sat and enjoyed this space for a couple hours. There were birds flying around this. These birds uh, were uh, uh, feeding on some type of salt deposit in this layer of rock right here. And there's a little bit of a swell coming in, like about a 1 foot swell, and it's making just these awesome gurgling sounds right along the water. And there's a little bit of a cave right here. And actually, around this point, you can't see it here, but around this point, a fellow I talked with the day before pointed out that you could see Capo Caccia and Alghero all the way from here. That's like 50 or 60 miles. I wouldn't have seen it if he hadn't pointed it out, because he's just way off on the horizon. You can barely see it. So I'm amazed, because Capo Caccia is a trademark. It is sort of the iconic landform there in Alghero. And I was just amazed. You could see it 50, 60 miles away. Well, this was just beautiful morning, just exploring this little oceanside feature right there. So I continued riding. I had some ups and downs. The temperature probably low to mid 80s. It was warm, but it wasn't hot. It was plenty warm, but it wasn't hot. And just enjoying the bike ride. It's just, I really like Sardinia, but I came to this particular location and I saw the first sign for Alghero. Even though Alghero is still another 30 miles, you have to go through Bosa first, but it was my first sign. Because Alghero is kind of the anticipation, that's sort of the destination. So here's Bosa, which also is a very pretty town. And these places in Sardinia, they're not a secret. A lot of people go to Sardinia for vacation. These aren't sleepy little towns that time forgot. Not at all. There's beautiful places that tourists, travelers like myself, like to see stuff like this. So these are not little sleepy towns. And this is just car-free Bosa right here. So I pass Bosa and it becomes a lot hillier between Bosa and Alghero. This area would be, here's Bosa, and this between Bosa and Alghero, and it's really up and down a lot. I spent a lot of time walking my bicycle, that's for sure. And this is the place I found to camp out. I was very fortunate that the trees were big enough to hang a hammock from. So what an awesome view. Just look at this view. That's the Mediterranean out there. I just love it. And this was the next day. This was the highest point above the Mediterranean between Bosa and Alghero, something about 1,000 feet, 300 meters above sea level. Just beautiful. And then a few hours later, this is Capo Caccia going out a little further than that, but that's the place I mentioned a minute ago where you could see that from almost as far as Oristano. And then Alghero is just around the corner. You can just catch a little bit of a sight of Alghero right here. So I'm getting close to Alghero, and here's actually the sign that says Alghero right there. So this is a map of Alghero. This scale right here, this is 1,000 feet. So this is from here to here, you know, it's maybe like a mile and a half. Uh, this right here, 96 Via Settembre 2020, that's where I stayed. I rented an apartment for 3 weeks in Alghero, and this is the main street of Alghero here. And this only a few minutes by bicycle to the Centro Storico. This purple is all Lungomare. Um, Even up here and even further up this way, Lungomare. Promenade in the evening, people just out walking and enjoying the view, particularly this area here, because this is the actual town of Alghero, and going up this way is kind of getting a little more into the beach, a little bit more the vacation area. But Alghero is big enough that its sort of main town is really doesn't look like a tourist place. It's just an Italian town. And most of the tourist stuff is up this way. And then, of course, a lot of these old medieval structures in the Centro Storico, they got fancy boutiques for clothes and jewelry and stuff like that too, but still looking very nice. Um, so Alghero is a popular place. Tourism is a big part of its economy, but this area here just looked like almost any kind of slightly shabby looking Italian town. So here's the main street right here. And up here, this is where I stayed for 3 weeks up here, where you see that awning right there. Uh, my friend Emmy, who I met last year, that's where she lives. I rented her place while she was gone for 2 weeks. And then we shared it for a week when she came back. And it was just awesome. I had a place, I could put my things down. Um, I could cook. I could relax. For a couple of days, I didn't even go anywhere. I just stayed here. But the Mediterranean is 3 minutes by bicycle. And then there's a lot of bike rides that I did starting out in Alghero. I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. But first, this is what the apartment looked like when coming in the front door up on the fourth floor. Nothing fancy, nice place. A lot of other people live in this apartment building. The parking for people with cars was under the building, not out on the street. This is the view from the terrace. The streets down here, a lot of trees, and then another apartment building right across. Sometimes there were people out dining, you know, here. You can see a little bit of this hill. That's kind of in the direction I went for my bike rides, most of my bike rides. Um, and then this is a awesome meal. I would go off and do stuff and come back. I just have a big meal. There was a pasta tagliata below Pizza by the Slice, right below the apartment building. And then there was fruit and veggie markets. So I ate well. It was really great because when I was traveling, I ate pretty much didn't cook, just had stuff, you know, from the store, from the market, which was good. But this was really nice to actually prepare something. This is from the terrace and looking out this way towards the west, and you catch just a little bit of a view of the Mediterranean here. And these construction cranes, none of these cranes moved any, they didn't do anything while I was there. Um, but you can see the street down below there. So this view right here, like 5 minutes from the apartment, I had a place I like to go to. I would self cater dinner a good number of times and just go to this particular place and have dinner on a bench. There's other people around, but this is more the Alghero area. There's not so much a tourist area here. This is part of the Lungomare right here. The Old Town right here. But I liked this place because it was quiet. And this is the view, the sun going down. My gosh. And this is, of course, Capocacha. I've been out here and there's this big cave right out here. And I spent time bike riding back on the other side of these hills here as well. But this is kind of what the Mediterranean looks like there. And you've got the old town. The next picture, we'll see these palm trees looking back in this direction right here. So here are those palm trees. This is kind of at the old town, that Centro Storico, and that previous image was taken from back here, somewhere back here. So uh, part of Alghero there is like a 500-year-old medieval wall, and it's just this area here is kind of becoming the car-free zone, substantial area in the old part of Alghero is car-free. That certainly is nice. Lots of sidewalk cafes. This is one of their iconic churches. I think that's like 500 years old. And people just like to sit and watch the sunset. Certainly all kinds of cafes and restaurants here and all this area going back this way towards these palm trees is just car free and just people walking and just enjoying a warm evening. And this is the downtown, old town. Again, no cars and lots of expensive shops, that's for sure. But the exteriors looking somewhat, like they had pretty well maintained. I mean, some people busking, and of course, lots of outdoor cafes. And back here, there are these kind of features, this catapult. In times past, the reason that they had a medieval wall is because there would be unfriendly invaders who would like to come and sack their city if they had a chance. So that's why they had the walls and a catapult to help defend themselves from the various enemies over the centuries. And I also add that, of course, pretty much everybody speaks Italian, but there, especially somewhat older people, would largely be speaking one of the Sardinian dialects. And then there's another population in Alghero, people who are descendants from colonists that came from near Barcelona, Spain, like 400 years ago. So there are some people in Alghero who speak from what I understand, it would be understandable to people in Barcelona. It is basically Catalan. So I just like the whole idea of all this history here, the languages and the architecture. Um, so I did a fair amount of bike riding, and let's go back up here to this map here. Here's Alghero, Bosa way down here. This is a little bit more detailed Alghero. This is Capocacha. I mentioned you look out, we saw that sunset picture that was looking out this way right here. So these green lines are all places I did bike riding. These distances aren't too great from Alghero to Villanova, 12 or 13 or 14 miles. So these are good bike rides, but these aren't like overnight bike rides. I would take a bus from Alghero and I would go up here to Villanova, which has an elevation of 500 meters above sea level. And that's where I would start my bike rides because it's mostly downhill. One day I biked to Bosa and took the bus back to Alghero. These bike rides fairly flat up here, but then, for example, this little bit here, you're losing 400 meters in elevation in about 3 or 4 miles. It's like you got your brakes on the whole time right here. This bike ride here is above the cliff. So you've got these views looking way down here. And this other bike ride, I came this way, kind of inland. And this, of course, is the main road between Busa and Alguero. And then there's this whole area north of Alguero. And this is, a lot of this is park area, so it's somewhat protected here. Porto Conte is the name of this big regional park. Lots of bike riding there too. Um, so this is why I had a bicycle with me so I could do a lot of this. I had a lot of these bike rides already figured out before I even left Eugene. I knew I was going to be doing all these bike rides because last year I did take a bus from down this way to Villanova, and I went back to Alguero this way on this road here, which of course is a elevation loss of 500 meters. Just beautiful bike rides. So let us go back to where we were. This is one of those bike rides, and this is looking back actually towards Mara, a place I was last year. This is a pretty wide open view of Sardinia, hilly, only really mountainous in a few places, but it's hilly everywhere. You can't be anywhere in Sardinia without seeing some pretty big hills or mountains in the distance. And most of it is up and down, but there are some pretty substantial flat areas, but not a lot. It's up and down in most locations. Here is part of a bike ride. I just cannot imagine a more scenic bike ride than down this gravel road like this. I was just pretty much in kind of a bliss doing this bike riding, and these are all cork oak trees right here. This is part of that ride above where the cliff, of course, you can see where it drops off right here. On one ride, I stopped at this little beach right here. That was really a nice little beach. And of course, this is Capocaccia out that way. Nice place to do bike riding. So this is the main street of Alguero, and you can just see all these cars. There's just lots and lots of cars. And because the main street is one lane in each direction, if you got one of these cars and you want to go somewhere, you have to back out into traffic. Really, it's really kind of semi-chaotic. It's kind of humorous a little bit. I would like it maybe if there were a lot less cars, but just about everybody's got a car. And there's no bike lane, but a lot of people do ride bikes. There's lots of scooters, there's lots of motorcycles. So it's not just cars. But there's no actual dedicated bike lane on the main street. There are other places along the Lungomare in Alguero. There is some really nice bike lanes, but here you're just going to be out with the traffic. That was a little bit out of sequence. We'll see some more pictures of downtown. Okay, here is another sunset view right here. Wow, that is just so pretty. And then this is another view of bike riding. I've been, actually, this is a little town. This is on my way to Bosa, and I have this climb to go up to this town right here. That was a nice climb. This was another bike ride. These are sheep. You see a few cows in Sardinia, but not that many. It's mostly sheep and goats. And this is another bike ride right here. Okay, and now we're back to Alguero. Somebody's parked their truck. The sidewalk is kind of a public space. I really kind of consider this to be bad manners for somebody to park their truck and kind of take up all that public space. Obviously, it's not so crowded. You see a lot of people on the sidewalk, though. And sometimes people sort of have to navigate, passing somebody from the other direction. Of course, this would be sticking out into the main street if it wasn't sticking out into the sidewalk. And then there was always construction going on somewhere. You could kind of navigate climbing over this. Like I mentioned, a little bit shabby. There were places where you can see this kind of stonework. There might be a stone square missing that you potentially could kind of trip on. Not a lot of that, but definitely some. You wouldn't see, you wouldn't see something like this in Germany. They would have it more together than this. You would see a fair amount of plaster that's kind of flaked off, or some place can need some paint. I wouldn't say that it's run down, but it is a little bit haphazard in places. But that's, to me, that's part of the charm as well. I didn't mind that. Here I am on my bicycle, and this is waiting for a red light. Lots of motorcycles. They pass cars to get up to where the stoplight was. That was fairly typical. This is just a few blocks from where the apartment is. A lot of people walking. This is a fruit and vegetable store where I went a lot. They just sold fruit and vegetables. That's it. That's all they sold right here. And they're busy a lot every time. Lots of people in here. And this is after a little bit of shopping. This is, I figure, about $13 worth of fruit and vegetables right here. That's what I spent for this amount of fruit and vegetables. I think actually costs a little bit less than fruit and vegetables here. So another bike ride to the north of Alghero, and this is another archaeological site. This is kind of like a little village of New Rogic, a little village. This was Palmavera, I think it's not Palmadura, that's wrong right there. It's Palmavera. And of course there's an interpretation. You pay a little bit to go see all this stuff. But again, the remains of the New Rogic culture here and there all over the place. My destination was this location. I'd been last year when I saw this place on a bike ride last year. I lamented that I didn't have my hammock. So this year, I specifically went here with my hammock and just enjoyed the view. There's a nice breeze. It's shady. This is just a great spot. There are a few other people around. There's a little beach right down here. You can even see a little umbrella. There's just a little drop off here, but there are people down here on the beach. And this is just a bay of the Mediterranean right there. I love it. And then coming back into Alghero, this is another part of the Lungomare. This is the big harbor kind of back that way. You can see some masts for the boats, and a lot of people walking here in the evening. There's cafes, and there's people selling sunglasses and hats and stuff out on the sidewalk. And then, of course, you can see this totally excellent bikeway right here. This was great right here. And once again, some more bike riding, Capocaccia. I've been on this little road right here, and that other photo of going down this little gravel lane with the cork trees, that's down here somewhere. So it was just wonderful to become a little bit acquainted with the geography of this place. I came up this way several times, so I recognized stuff and anticipated stuff. And this is, of course, another New Rogic site right here. I went in here, it's kind of like being in a cave. Kind of wonder, what do they use this stuff for? Was it ceremonial? Was it defensive? The New Rogic people didn't have a language or written language, so they didn't really leave any kind of records that you could figure out. So a lot of mystery there. And this is that one little beach coming back from one bike ride. Just a beautiful little beach, not crowded, a little bit of a wave coming in right here. I'm told that there are times in the winter people do surf around here. Uh, that's more in the fall when you have weather conditions that kick up some waves off the coast of South France. I actually went surfing last summer south of here, and it was a 2 meter wave. They can have 2 and 3 meter waves here. I don't know if this particular spot is a surf place, but I do know for a fact people do surf in Sardinia. One evening, I went to hear some big band jazz. This was great, and all these women singing big band and jazz. Yeah, it's really good. I sure enjoyed that. And here is another view. That's that little beach I mentioned. Uh, Another view looking down on the Mediterranean. My friend Emmy sent me an email advising me about a meeting that was going to happen in this little village near Alghero, and it was about natural building. And I saw that, and I know there's interest in permaculture in places around Sardinia. So I went to this meeting and I met a bunch of people. The topic was building with non-conventional types of building materials. So it turns out that this fellow here, Marco, is building this structure here. This isn't about an hour by bicycle from Alghero. So I went out there and spent a few days and got real muddy helping out with this. It's post and beam construction. Here's the post, there's the beams. But between the posts where you wouldn't have windows or doors, there's packed mixture of hay, water, and soil. And you pack it into forms. And then after you packed it in there, you let it dry for a day, and then you move the form up the wall. And that's how you make these walls right here. I've got a few more pictures that show what that looks like. Let's look at this one first. These are the bathtubs right here that you get in there with your feet, and you mix it. These are all those walls. These are all packed. This stuff goes into the walls here. And of course, I hung my hammock here. I was told I was the first person to sleep inside the house. And here I am packing some of this mixture into this form right here. That's a good deal of work. And there would be other people came to help. This is kind of an unusual project. So this woman came with her 2 kids from Sassari, which is a larger town nearby. So of course this is Marco, and this is Elena here. They live here, and she actually did a children's book with these really beautiful little illustrations. She's very talented. This is Marco's mom. This is Anna from Milano, and I forgot his name. He's an architect again from Sassari, interested in the project. So this is just we finished had a nice lunch after doing some work on the place. Just great to meet people, work on my Italian, and just be in a really pretty place. They've already planted. Marco's already planted a lot of fruit and nut trees out here too. This is kind of basically homesteading, Sardinia style, and there are some other people nearby who are interested and actually doing some projects like this. Also, this location, about a half hour by bike, is kind of an alternative group living in the country on the property of a fellow who has got several hundred acres and is very counterculture. Augustino, we'll see Augustino in a moment, but they're sort of in the early going of wanting to create some kind of a rural community. And I stayed there for a couple days too, and just some really nice people, totally counterculture, into permaculture, into creating alternatives to the mainstream right there. And this is Augustino. He makes yogurt and milks his sheep. These are sheep being milked right here. He milks a bunch of sheep. I watched this. It was quite interesting. So he has a lot of alternative ideas about creating economic and social uh, alternatives to the mainstream. So this is his sister, and this is a woman who lives up there on the hilltop. The community is kind of down this slope, back down this way. So this again, some of the landscape of that part of Sardinia. And I stopped when I left uh, Augustino's place. I stopped off at the construction site to say goodbye to them, Elena and her kids. Just really, really nice people. I just enjoyed making friends and seeing some people with a vision, of what they want to do with their lives, and putting some hard work into making that happen. So I left Sardinia, and my next destination was Ostia, which is a town near Rome, back on the Italian mainland. I sure enjoyed Alghero, though. Well, it was kind of difficult to leave. Um, I just had such a good time in Alghero, but I was there for what I'd planned, and I had about 3 weeks at that point to make it back to Stockholm. So I kind of had to pick up the pace a little bit. But near Ostia is Ostia Antica. Uh, this isn't what Ostia looks like now. This is Ostia Antica, and this is a thermopolium. Ostia Antica was the ancient port city of Rome, and it's a huge, I would imagine 10 or 15,000 people live there. It goes on. It's a big area. It'd take you 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other end. It's kind of elongated along the Tiber River. But you can go there and you can see what's left. And then there's explanations of what you're looking at everywhere in Italian and in English. So you can see this really nice mosaic. But this is a fast food counter right here. Most people then didn't have a kitchen, they'd eat out all the time. And you would go to this place and see your friends and have a cheap meal. Um, so I just loved it. This is inside right here. This view right here is somebody's idea of what this might have looked like 2,000 years ago. Just look at that. There's artwork here. This is where you pick up your plate here. This is the same, kind of looks like a fireplace right here. This is the same place as this right here. But this is an artist's conception of what this might have looked like 2,000 years ago. I just find this just absolutely fascinating. I sat in here for half an hour, just kind of imagining what this might have been like. It's just, I like antiquities. This here is would have been a bakery, and these are flour mills right here. Of course, they're busted off. You probably had some animal walking around in a circle, or maybe some slaves to grind up that flour right there. And this is, they had apartment buildings like 4 stories high, apartment buildings. So this is in a residential area right here. Just the amphitheater. I hung out some at the amphitheater. I think it had about like a 4,000 person capacity, this amphitheater. And then online, I found this image of what Ostia Antica might have looked like 2,000 years ago. Here's the Tiber River, and of course, Rome is further up the river, about 12 or 14 miles. But just this is the amphitheater. The Thermopolium would have been back over here. They had uh, hot baths, residential, they had businesses, they had warehouses. I mean, this was a very sophisticated city. They had ships docking in here that came from all over the Roman Empire. Wow, can you imagine what stores had for sale here, from different parts of the empire? Just absolutely amazing. So, after I recovered from having a bunch of stuff stolen, I had to buy a new bicycle. Um, but I continued on my way and went up past Venezia, that's northeast Italy. This is Slovenia. This is Ljubljana. This is a beautiful town. I just had a train stop here for a couple hours. I really lamented that. I had made other plans. I would like to have stayed here for a couple days. This is just this beautiful downtown area of Ljubljana. It's car free. There's a fountain. Look at this architecture. There's cafes. There's people busking. There's people just sitting on this monument right here. Just one of the nicest uh, small city downtown pedestrian centro I've seen anywhere. My only lament was I couldn't stay there really any longer. So got on the train to Zagreb, and Zagreb is Croatia. And because I had some stuff stolen, I had to start making use of my laptop for doing photography. So some of the remaining pictures aren't so great. Some of them I actually took off the internet. But on the train to Zagreb, I met some guys, and this is Francesco, and he's an Italian guy. And we just had these great conversations, totally into permaculture and similar kind of points of view. Of course, speaks really, really good English. I think he spent some time in England. He speaks really good English. And so I took a picture of us because we're having just such a good time right there. And then, where am I? Let's see. Yeah, here we are. So I continued. I didn't stay in Zagreb. I had a bike ride planned. I identified a town I wanted to go to in Croatia to go to their train station. And then I would go on small local trains into Hungary to a place I had plans to visit in Hungary. I had a little bike issue, so I had to get off my bike and do a little repair right here where there was this monument. There was this tank right there. This area, 20, 23 years ago, was a war zone. When Yugoslavia came undone, there was war here. There were people losing their lives. There were people, refugees, to get out of the war zone. It's hard to imagine, but this was a war zone. So now Yugoslavia has been split up into a number of different independent countries. So this is Croatia, used to be a part of Yugoslavia, but now it's its own country. Slovenia, the same. Serbia. It's complicated, pretty fascinating. But so this monument with the tank is kind of a reminder of that period of time, not so long ago. So I got to Dumovar, uh, really anticipating nice bike ride for a couple days. I'm going to take the train. I had all these sort of anticipations of being on these local trains and then going into Hungary and then going to Janoslomo. Uh, but it started here in Dumovar, except it didn't start here. the train station had closed 10 years before. I'm sure it was a casualty of the economic disruption from the war. So I couldn't take the train because the train station wasn't working. I had to take a bus all the way back to Zagreb. So, oh, let's see. So I did go back to Zagreb, and I had a crazy train bus ride from Zagreb that somewhat later the next day to Budapest, and that's a lengthy story right there. But I did go to Budapest, and I had to go to another train station to take a train to Genosalma, Hungary, where I made a service visit. Um, and while I was there in Genosalma, there was a birthday party. Miklos, my Servas friend, this is his son right here, had a birthday. So there was a birthday party. There was birthday cake. There was a lot of food. Very nice property here. Wow, this was a nice place. Um, it was a great party, and my good fortune that mostly younger people and just about everybody spoke English. So I had a great chance to talk with a lot of people just about, what's up with their lives or what did they do. This was a lot of fun right here. This is John Oshalma. This was this little uh, village grocery store. The town's not big enough to have a bigger grocery store. I think they had another one kind of like this, but nothing fancy. The reason I took this picture or took this picture from the internet, because right about down here, there's a place that we would drink beer. Miklos, a friend of his, and me had beer down there several times. And there's this kind of pedestrian zone right here, close to downtown. And again, this is a small town. But I liked to find out a little bit what was life like back when the Soviets were kind of occupying this. I was told that where you see this arrow, there used to be a monument to Soviet soldiers, and the message being to the local Hungarians, they should be grateful for the Soviets. Well, from what I understand, most of the Hungarians didn't really see it that way. They wish that the Soviets weren't there when there was the Hungarian uprising in 1956. The statue got knocked over and vandalized. Well, the Soviets regained control. The monument was put back in place, at least for a while. And then about 1990, when the Soviet Union came undone, the monument was taken down for good. So it's not there anymore. But just knowing a little bit of the history of that spot, uh, it just it just helps me appreciate more a place where I've been, especially because I have an interest in that history. To hear those stories, and I heard some other stories from that period of time as well. Miklos and I did a bike ride. We went to uh, this nearby town, Baja. This is the Danube River. We went swimming in the river. We went bike riding in this forest area with in the mud and the mosquitoes. That was a neat ride too. And Miklos, very active guy. He's got a great garden as well. Wow, he's got a really nice garden at home. He and his wife Susanna were very hospitable. I just totally enjoyed my visit there. So this is actually a picture from the internet of downtown Baja, and it's a really nice pedestrian zone downtown. This isn't a big city. I'm guessing probably, I don't know, 25,000 or something like that. Really nice town. Lots of nice bicycle infrastructure there in Baja as well. And there's a train between Jana Shlomo uh, and Baja, a tiny little diesel train, like a bus. There's trains. Hungary's got a lot of trains. I sure wish we had something like that. So I uh, I returned to Budapest. This is a picture I lifted from the internet. I actually did go down into this really nice park. There's this amazing fountain, just this giant, big, active, choreographed kind of fountain down here. One of the train stations is back over here. The two other train stations were back over this way. Uh, I did a lot of bike riding around and not knowing Budapest so well, the layout of all these train stations, because as it turned out, I did train business with all three different train stations. I know better now. I didn't need to bike around so much. So I left Budapest and I really had to make my way towards Stockholm. That's still another week away. But this is Warsaw, Poland, right here. And I took this picture with my laptop because of this characteristic Soviet architecture. This is a real iconic form of architecture. You can see places in Moscow, as it turned out, in Riga, any bigger city of the former Warsaw Pact has got some kind of big building that looks something like this. And I just find it amazing. I was just like when I first saw it, I was going, wow, it just really connects me to a whole period of history. So, um, so I went through, let me see, yeah, um, so I'll just do a little narrating. I left, I left Warsaw and I still had a good ways to go in Poland. I took a train um, up to Suwałki, which is the last town in Poland before you come into Lithuania. I camped out a night there. I got there late on the train. I biked out of town and I camped out outside of the small town. I thought I could take a train from Suwałki to someplace in Lithuania. Well, there really isn't much of a connection from Suwałki into Lithuania. I ended up paying for a 150 euro taxi ride. That's $160. I had a taxi driver take me to Kaunas, which is a larger town in Lithuania. And even there, the train almost it didn't work for me. There's a train that goes to Vilnius, the biggest city in Lithuania, but there wasn't a train that went to Riga in Latvia. So, but there was a bus, and it was in uh, Kaunas where I took a bus to Riga, Latvia, and because I had to go to this place called uh, Ventspils in Latvia because that's where the ferry would go back to Sweden. So I got to Riga late in the day. It was a very interesting ride on the bus. I'm going through Lithuania. I'm going through an area where Belarusia is over in that direction, 15 miles, and Kaliningrad, which is a Russian enclave, is 15 miles in the other direction. This is a, a political, geographic, global kind of potential hotspot. And of course, Ukraine is not so far away either. So I'm kind of thinking about this while I am while I'm riding the bus and just being in this part of Europe. So I went to Ventspils and I stayed a couple of nights here. There's a river port, and here's the Baltic out here. I just kind of went wild with the architecture there. This is a brick building. You know, you can use brick, you can use stone, you can use wood, you can do stucco as building materials, but there's just unlimited variety of what you can do with those building materials. I just have a big interest in ornamentation and what do people do with those building materials. This kind of a cupola here. Um, this is kind of a nice little car-free zone downtown. Look at this structure here, of course. Looks a little Greek there. I mean, all architecture is sort of a mix of different stuff. Ventspils was just such a nice town. It's a vacation destination also in Latvia as well. Latvia being one of the three Baltic countries. There's Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. They're very small. They have fascinating history. I've learned a lot more of their history since I was there, just to find out more of what goes on there, what did. And let's go back here. So the campground was really super nice in Ventspils. Okay, here we go. This is the campground. It's one of the nicest campgrounds I saw in Europe. And interestingly, the campground in Ventspils had much larger area of the campground dedicated to tents, because in more Western Europe, more people have got camper vans and small recreational kind of camping vehicles, not as big as what you see in the US, but sort of smaller versions of that. Just a really nice campground. This is the entry to the campground right here. Nice colors. They have Wi-Fi. The facilities were all super clean, all super nice. It's really a wonderful campground. I just had a great time in Ventspils. So I did get on the ferry one day, and it's about a 10 or 12 hour ferry ride to south of Stockholm. And I camped out there one night because it was late when the ferry arrived, and I biked about 40 miles into Stockholm. And um, this is a view from my laptop, not really so great, of a nice park area in Stockholm. Here's another view of Stockholm. I had a wonderful evening with Annika and Adrian, a friend of theirs, came over. We talked until midnight, had a great meal, left my bicycle there with Adrian, and I had to be up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to the airport. So great memories of all this entire trip. Uh, I love visiting Europe, and it was just wonderful to go back to some of the same places and then go to some new places too, meet friends. Just love to hear stories from people's lives, uh, spontaneous encounters, the architecture, the landscape, just oftentimes seeing what I do in unplanned situations that sometimes were not by choice. I found I've got an enormous amount of stamina, for, okay, this is the situation, this is what I need to do, whether it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 2 o'clock in the morning. Lots of great stories. So that is what I have. Of course, I got lots more pictures and lots more stories, but those are some of good ones right there. So I am going to say thanks for your attention, and you're certainly welcome to contact me and ask me anything about my trip. It was an awesome, good time. So thanks for watching.